Get comfortable. Turn the light down or off and let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Tonight we are going somewhere you have already been 100 times without ever once looking around properly. You have looted 1,000 desks. You have cleared 1,000 office drawers, tipped over 1,000 filing cabinets, and swept 1,000 shelves into a bag that never seems to fill up. You have done it fast, with a weapon in one hand, on your way to somewhere more interesting. And in all that time, you have almost certainly never wondered who does that for a living. Not as an adventure. As a job. 40 hours a week, in the same 6 square miles, with a buyer waiting and a debt on the cart. Because somebody does. In the Commonwealth in the year 2287, salvage is a trade, and it has all the things a trade has. It has apprenticeships, in the sense that you learn it from somebody older who is not always patient. It has tools you own and tools you rent. It has territory and quiet agreements about territory, and people who honor them because it is easier than the alternative. It has a price list that moves. It has a slow season. It has an entirely unglamorous relationship with the weather. So tonight, you are not passing through. You are not clearing a building on your way to a quest marker. You are the person who works that building, and will work it again next month, and knows exactly how much of it is left. If you enjoy these, it genuinely does help to subscribe. And I like reading where people are listening from, and what hour it is where you are. Tell me sometime, but not now. Now, let it get dark. It is 2287, 210 years after the bombs. The place is the Commonwealth, the stretch of drowned and rusted country that was once Massachusetts. And your particular corner of it sits about half a day's walk west of Diamond City, close enough that the market matters to you, and far enough that you have never been inside the stadium walls more than a handful of times in your life. The settlement is 9 buildings, if you are generous about what a building is. 4 of them were houses before the war, and are still recognizably houses. 3 are shacks assembled from the other houses on the same street, which are now gone, having been taken apart deliberately and carefully over about 40 years. 1 is the watershed. 1 is a barn that holds 2 Brahmin, and, in bad weather, considerably more people than that. There is a wall. It is not a good wall. It is corrugated sheet and scaffold pipe, and a section of chain link that somebody dragged an unbelievable distance and has never stopped mentioning. It would not stop anyone determined. What it does, which is what most walls in the Commonwealth actually do, is make the settlement look like a place where people are paying attention. That is usually enough to move a problem along to somewhere easier. You are 31. You were born here, in the barn, which people still find funny. You have never been further west than the river crossing, or further south than the marshes. And you have no particular ambition to change that, because everything you know how to do is priced in the ground you already know. What you do is salvage. You have a claimed route. You have a hand cart. You have a buyer at the trading post who will look at what you bring and give you caps for it. And you have a fairly precise idea, before you even leave, of roughly what today is going to be worth. You wake before there is light. Not to a sound. There is no bell here, and nobody comes to get you. You wake to the fact that the air in the shack has changed temperature, which it does about an hour before dawn, every day. And after 11 years of this, your body has simply agreed to treat that as the signal. You lie there for a moment in the dark, with the blanket up under your chin, and you do the small, daily arithmetic of whether it is worth getting up. It always is. That does not stop you doing it. The shack is one room. There is a mattress, which came out of a house 4 streets over, and has been restuffed twice with rag, and once, memorably and unsuccessfully, with dried marsh grass. There is a table you built badly, and a stool somebody else built well, which you traded for and are quietly proud of. There is a shelf. There is a lamp, oil, with a wick you cut yourself from a strip of cloth, and a tin of oil beside it that represents about a day and a half of work. You strike a light. The room comes up yellow and small, and the window, which is a window frame with a sheet of scratched pre-war plastic in it, goes black and reflective. Now, look at what you own. The cart is outside under a lean-to, and it is by a very long way the most valuable thing in your life. 2 wheels, a flat bed, handles, and a strap that goes across your chest for the hills. The wheels came off something pre-war, and they are steel-rimmed and true, which is the whole reason the cart is worth anything at all. Anyone can build a box. Nobody in the Commonwealth is making a round, straight, load-bearing wheel from scratch in 2287, and everybody knows it. When you talk about the cart, what you are actually talking about is the wheels. You do not own the cart outright. You own most of it. There is a man at the trading post who put up the wheels 3 years ago against a share of everything you brought in, and you have been paying that down ever since in small, honest increments, and you have about 7 months left. You think about that number more often than you would like to admit. 7 months. It sits behind everything. The tools you do own. A pry bar, flattened at one end and hooked at the other, which is the single item you would run back into a burning building for. A pair of cutters for wire, with the jaws reground so many times, the profile has changed shape. A screwdriver with 3 interchangeable ends, which is genuinely a lovely object, and was made before the war by people who expected it to last about 10 years. It has lasted 210. A hammer, a short saw, a folding knife, a satchel, canvas, with a shoulder strap you have replaced 4 times. A canteen? 2, actually, and both of them full is the difference between a long day and a short one. You have a pair of boots, resoled with tire rubber, and a second pair that are worse, and that you keep because a scavenger with no boots is not a scavenger. You do not have a Pip-Boy. Almost nobody does. You have met 3 people in your life who did, and one of them was lying. You do not really have a weapon, in the sense the word usually means. There is a pistol in the settlement, held in common, and it lives with whoever is on the gate. You have a knife and a length of pipe on the cart, and the pipe is honestly there for leverage more than anything else. This is not recklessness. It is arithmetic. A weapon you cannot maintain and cannot feed is a heavy object that makes you feel brave. And feeling brave is not a survival trait out here. Your safety is made out of route planning, daylight, and the willingness to walk away from a building. It is made out of knowing which streets have a reputation and going around them, adding 40 minutes and thinking nothing of it. You sit up, The floor is cold through your socks. You do the things you do every morning in the order you do them, because an order means you never stand in the middle of the room trying to remember what you have forgotten. Boots, water, a mouthful from the jug, and not from the canteens, because the canteens are for the road, and you do not touch the road water inside the walls. Then the small tin box off the shelf. Inside the tin box is your money. It is not much, and it is not meant to be much, because caps sitting in a tin are caps doing nothing. There are about 90 in there. 40 of those are already promised to the trading post at the end of the week. 12 are for oil. The rest are what stands between you and a bad month, and everybody here has a very clear sense of how thin that is. You put the lid back on, and you put the tin back on the shelf, which is not hiding it, because there is nowhere in this settlement to hide anything from anyone, and that is not really how it works here anyway. There are 9 buildings and 41 people, and every single one of them knows what everyone else has. The tin sits on the shelf because a thing that is obviously in its place is a thing nobody thinks about. Then you stand in the middle of the small yellow room with your hands on your hips and you listen. You are listening for the pump. The settlement's water pump runs off a wind vane on the barn roof, and it makes a particular slow knocking sound when it is drawing. And if you cannot hear it in the pre-dawn quiet, then something has happened that will reorganize everybody's day, including yours. It is knocking. Slow, uneven, exactly as it always is. Good. Then you listen for the weather, which is a thing you can genuinely do after enough years. Wind direction against the plastic in the window. Whether the air has that flat, mineral taste that comes before a rad storm, which is not something you could describe to a stranger, and is not something you have ever been wrong about twice in a row. Nothing. Ordinary air. Ordinary wind from the northwest, which is the good direction. So it is a working day, which means in about 20 minutes you are going to pick up a cart and walk out through a gate into a country that has been picked over by 3 generations of people exactly like you, and find somewhere in it about a day's wage in screws and copper and ceramic and wire. That is the job. And the first thing you should know about it is that almost everything you think it involves is wrong. Here is the picture most people carry, and it comes from a very particular place. Somebody who has never done this work imagines a room nobody has opened in 200 years. A door swollen shut, a shoulder against it, one good shove, and then a space full of things. A desk with its drawers still packed, a safe, a shelf of untouched goods, a rifle propped in a corner by a man who never came home for it. The scavenger walks in, takes everything of value in about 4 minutes, and walks out richer than when they went in. That room does not exist. It has not existed for a very long time. If it ever did, somebody's great-grandmother emptied it in the first 30 years, and then somebody else went back for what she left. And then somebody else after that went back for what the second person thought was worthless. And by now, the room has been entered so many times that the dust on the floor is a record of footprints going back further than anyone can name. The Commonwealth ran out of easy salvage roughly 2 centuries ago. What is left is not treasure. What is left is inventory. That is the actual shape of the job, and it is worth sitting with, because it changes everything about how the day goes. You are not searching. Searching implies something hidden. You are conducting an inspection of a building that nobody is coming back to, with a working knowledge of what buildings of this type contain and where those things are located, and you are removing the fraction of it that somebody 2 hours' walk from here can still make do something. Nobody hid anything from you. The wire in the wall was never hidden. It was installed by a man in a canvas jacket who was paid by the hour to put it there, and who assumed, quite reasonably, that it would sit inside that wall for 80 years and then be replaced during a renovation. It is behind plaster because that is where wire goes. The fact that you now have to open the plaster to get it is not a puzzle. It is just work. And this is the thing that separates a person who lasts at this from a person who does it for one season and then goes to farm. The ones who last stop expecting to be surprised. They stop hoping. Hope is expensive out here. It makes you walk an extra 4 hours to a place with a good story attached to it. And the good story is why 9 other people have already been. And you arrive at dusk with a cart you now have to push home empty. The people who make a living at salvage make it by going to unremarkable places on a schedule and coming back with unremarkable quantities of the same 6 or 7 materials, week after week, the way a fisherman goes to the same water. Which brings you to the second thing, and this one is the actual key to the whole trade. Value out here has almost nothing to do with what a thing was worth before the war. That is not a philosophical observation. It is the practical arithmetic you're going to run every time you pick something up today. The old world priced things by scarcity and desire, and by 100 layers of stuff nobody has needed since the 23rd of October, 2077. Brand, fashion, novelty. Whether the thing was new, whether the neighbors had one. None of that survived. What survived is a much simpler question, and it is the only question that matters. Can somebody still make this do something? A cracked ceramic mug with a slogan on it, produced by the 100,000, sold for pocket change. That mug is worth taking, because ceramic can be ground and mixed and used in a dozen repairs, and because the Commonwealth has no working kilns worth the name. A gold ring, which the old world would have priced at a month of someone's wages, is worth almost nothing to you. Gold is soft and pretty, and there is nothing in this settlement it can fix. You would take it because it weighs nothing, and somebody in Diamond City will give you a few caps out of sentiment or vanity. But you would take a fistful of screws over it without hesitating, and you would not think about the choice for even a second. That inversion is the single most useful thing you know. Everything the old world called precious, the wasteland mostly calls decorative. Everything the old world called disposable, the fasteners, the tape, the wire, the springs, the sealant, the plain glass, the wasteland calls essential, because those are the things it cannot make any more and cannot function without. You are not a treasure hunter. You are a supplier of raw material to an economy that lost the ability to manufacture and never got it back. Right? The kit. You do this by lamplight because the sun is not up, and because a lamp costs less than the oil to run it for an hour, which is one of the small maths that governs the whole morning. The lamp sits on the crate you use as a table, and everything you own that matters lives within one arm's reach of it, which is not tidiness. It is so you can put your hand on any of it in the dark. The pry bar first, because the pry bar is the trade. It is about 2 feet of flat steel, forged from something that was originally part of a vehicle chassis, with a chisel end and a hooked end and a bend in the middle that gives you leverage against a floor. You did not make it. You bought it from a smith in a settlement 2 days south, 4 years ago, for more caps than you had, and you paid the last of it off in installments over a season. It is the most expensive object you have ever owned. If you had to choose between the bar and everything else in this room, you would take the bar and walk out. Cutters next. 2 pairs, a heavy pair for cable and a fine pair for the small work. And the fine pair matters more than people think, because most of what you take today will be recovered from inside something else, and the difference between cutting cleanly and tearing is the difference between wire a buyer wants and wire a buyer shrugs at. A hammer with a face worn round, a short saw, a flat scraper, a brush, which sounds absurd until you have spent an afternoon trying to identify what is under 60 years of settled ash. 2 screwdrivers, a magnet on a string, which is the cheapest tool you own and has probably paid for itself 400 times over, because a magnet dropped into a gap in a floor tells you in 1 second whether there is anything ferrous down there worth opening the floor for. Then the satchel, which carries the tools and nothing else. Then the water. Then the food, which you will get to, and then the cart. And the cart deserves a proper explanation, because a stranger looking at you would assume you push a cart because you are poor and cannot afford a Brahmin. That is not why. Here is the problem the cart solves. A strong adult can carry, over broken ground, for a full working day, somewhere in the region of 40 pounds without ruining themselves. You can carry more than that. Anybody can carry more than that for an hour. But this is not an hour. This is out at first light and back at dusk, over roadbed that has been freezing and thawing without repair for 200 years. And the weight you carry at hour 10 is not the weight you carried at hour 1. People who overload themselves do it once, and then they spend 3 weeks not working. And 3 weeks not working is a genuine catastrophe in a household with no reserve. 40 pounds of salvage is not a living. It is barely a day's food and water. So you need to move perhaps 3 or 4 times that, and there are only 2 ways to do it. An animal or wheels. An animal eats every day, including the days you do not work. It needs water, which is the most expensive thing in the Commonwealth. It needs somewhere to be kept, and somebody to watch it, and it represents, all told, a capital investment roughly equal to 2 good years, which you have never had 2 of in a row. The cart eats nothing. The cart is a flatbed about the length of your body, built on 2 wheels salvaged off a pre-war utility trailer. With a handle frame you rebuilt yourself last spring after the original cracked. It cost you the wheels, some timber, and about 6 days of work. It carries perhaps 150 pounds over decent ground before it becomes a fight. It also, and this is the part that took you 2 years to properly appreciate, forces discipline. A pack lets you keep adding to it, because the pain is gradual, and you can always talk yourself into one more. A cart tells you when it is full. The handles come up. The wheels start to bind on the uneven parts. The cart argues with you honestly, which is more than most things do. The disadvantages are real, and you know them all. The cart cannot go anywhere with stairs, which rules out most of the interesting parts of most buildings, which is why you do the hauling in loads down to street level, and the cart never comes inside. The cart cannot cross rubble. The cart is loud on a gravel surface, and noise is not something you want more of. And a loaded cart is visible from a long way off and announces exactly what you are and roughly how good your day has been, which is a consideration for the walk home rather than the walk out. So, the tools go in the satchel goes on the cart, and you leave a great deal behind. You leave the second saw. You leave the crowbar that is nearly as good as the pry bar, but heavier by 3 pounds. And 3 pounds compounded over 11 hours is a real number. You leave anything you have not used in a month. Water last. 2 containers filled from the settlement's tank yesterday evening. And the second one is not spare so much as it is the reason you can consider a route that goes further than the halfway stream. Water is not something you drink. Water is the shape of your day, and how much of it you are carrying is the actual answer to the question of how far you are going. You stand in the doorway with the lamp still burning behind you, and you check the sky properly, which is different from listening at the window. You want the horizon in the northwest, and you want to know what color it is under the last of the stars, and whether there is that faint green tinge along the low edge that means something is coming across the interior. There is not. There is grey going to grey, an ordinary lid over an ordinary morning, and the wind is still coming from the good direction and carrying nothing but cold. You blow out the lamp. Outside, the cold has a texture to it. It sits on the skin in a thin film that will burn off within the hour. But for now, it is the first honest thing of the day, and it wakes you more completely than sitting up did. The cart handles are cold enough to be unpleasant through the wrappings. You take them anyway, and lean forward, and the wheels come unstuck from the dirt with the small, dry sound they always make. And that is the day begun. The settlement is not asleep. Settlements are never entirely asleep. There is a shape moving down by the water tank. Someone filling containers in the hour when nobody is waiting behind them. And further off, there is the sound of a hand pump being worked. 4 strokes and a pause, 4 strokes and a pause, which is somebody who knows the pump and knows exactly how much they need. A dog is awake and has decided not to bark at you, which took 2 years to arrange. Somebody's rooster, one of the sad, thin descendants of pre-war stock that runs half wild between the sheds, is making a noise that is only approximately the noise a rooster is supposed to make. You pass the drying racks with their strips of meat gone leathery, covered against the flies with a mesh somebody salvaged out of a screen door. You pass the plot where the potatoes are coming up in their crooked rows. You pass the low wall, which is not a wall so much as a long argument between 3 families about what constitutes a wall, made of tires packed with dirt and sheet steel, and one section of actual pre-war cinder block that somebody dragged here across 2 miles and never let anyone forget about. The gate is a gate in the sense that it can be closed. This morning it is open, and the watch is a man in his 50s, sitting on an upturned crate with a rifle across his knees, and a mug of something hot going cold beside him. He has been on since 2. He will come off at first proper light and sleep until midday, and nobody will expect anything of him until then. And that is the arrangement. He looks at the cart. He looks at you. You tell him where you are going. Not vaguely, specifically. The office block on the north side of the interchange. Then, if the morning goes well, the residential row that runs east from it and back along the stream road rather than the highway, and you expect to be at the trading post before the light goes. He repeats the essentials back to you. Interchange, then east, then the stream road. He does not write it down, because there is no reason to write it down, and paper is worth something. He holds it in his head until you come back, and then he lets it go. This is worth understanding properly, because it is the closest thing the Wasteland has to insurance. Nobody is coming to rescue you. If you break an ankle in a stairwell 4 miles out, there is no organization that will be dispatched. What there is instead is a man on a crate who knows roughly where you were going, and who will mention it to 2 or 3 people if you are not back by dark, and who might, if the weather is fine and the settlement can spare the hours, walk the stream road with a lantern and shout your name at a few doorways. That is the entire safety net. It costs nothing, and it is worth a great deal, and the price of it is that you tell the truth about your route every time, including the days when you would rather not say where you found what you found. Scavengers who lie about their routes get found later, or not at all. You go through the gate. The first hour is walking and nothing else, and there is a thing that happens in that hour, which is the reason a lot of people who try this work do not stay in it. Nothing occurs. The light comes up by degrees. The cart makes its noise. Your hands warm. The settlement drops behind a rise and stops existing. And ahead of you, there are 4 miles of ground you have crossed perhaps 200 times, and you cross them again. And the whole of it is legwork with no reward attached at either end yet. The route you are walking is not the direct route. It has never been the direct route. Here is the thing that people get wrong about how a working salvager moves through a landscape. The instinct, if you have not done it, is to plan around the buildings, to look at a map of ruins and draw a line between the richest ones and walk that line. Nobody who has been doing this for more than a season plans that way. You plan around water first. You plan around shade second. You plan around sightlines third. Where the buildings fall on that plan is the 4th consideration, and if a magnificent, untouched warehouse sits 4 miles off any water in an afternoon that is going to be hot, then that warehouse is not on your route, and it will still be there in October. Water first, because the arithmetic is brutal and simple. You are carrying 2 containers. 2 containers is a day if the day is mild and you are not hauling, and 2 containers is most of a day if you are hauling, and it is not. The halfway stream, which is not a stream so much as a shallow run of water coming out of a culvert and going nowhere in particular, is the hinge that the entire eastern half of your territory swings on. It is not clean. You would not drink it standing there, but it is water you can carry back and put through the settlement's filters. And more to the point, it is water you can wet a cloth in. And on a bad afternoon, a wet cloth around the back of the neck is the difference between finishing the day and sitting down. shade second for the same reason. Sightlines third, and this is the one that shapes the walking more than anything. You do not go through the underpass, ever, though the underpass would save you 11 minutes. You do not walk the bottom of the cut where the old rail line runs, because the bottom of a cut is a place where you can see nothing and be seen by everything above you. You go along the upper edge on the exposed ground, which is longer and harder on the cart and completely open, and which means that anything that wants to be near you has to cross 100 yards of nothing to do it, in daylight, while you are looking at it. Exposure sounds like the wrong choice. Exposure, in open country, is the right choice almost every time. It is the enclosed shortcut that gets people. The road surface underfoot is pre-war asphalt, and it is failing in the particular way asphalt fails, when nobody has maintained it for 210 winters. The frost gets into a hairline crack. The water in the crack freezes and widens it. The next summer, something grows in the widened crack, and the roots do in a decade what the frost was going to take 50 years to do. What you are walking on now is less a road than a field of black plates, some of them tilted, with grass and low scrub running in the seams between them. And the cart has to be steered around the worst of it, the way you would steer a boat. You can still tell it was a road. That is the strange part. 2 centuries, and the shape of it survives, because somebody graded the ground under it and put down a bed of stone. And a graded bed of stone with a camber to shed rainwater is a piece of engineering that outlasts the surface laid on top of it by a very long way. It was a commuter road. You can tell that, too, from the width and from the direction it runs, and from the ruined stumps of what were signs. The people who used it were driving into the city in the morning and out of it in the evening, 5 days a week, in a country that had been rationing fuel for a decade, and where a full tank was a serious purchase. Most of them would have been in fusion drive cars if they could afford one, and something older if they could not. And they sat in a queue on this stretch every morning of their working lives, and it would have been the most boring hour of their day, and they would have complained about it. And on the last morning, they were in that queue. Whatever happened on a Saturday in the 3rd week of October. And there is a version of this road, a few miles further in, where the cars are still standing in their lanes in a way that only makes sense if they were stopped when it happened. Out here they are mostly gone, dragged off, stripped for the frames and the wiring, and anything that would burn, by 4 or 5 generations of people who needed steel more than they needed the road to look tidy. What is left is the occasional rusted shell, too far gone to be worth the hauling, sitting off the shoulder with grass through the floor. You have taken copper out of a dozen of them over the years. Everyone had somebody's things in it. 2 miles out, on the long rise where the ground opens, you stop and look north for a while. There is a ridgeline there with a broken transmission tower on it, and below the tower a cluster of low buildings that had a name once and now has a reputation, which is a different kind of name and travels further. People have been seen up there in the last month. Nobody knows how many, and nobody has any particular interest in finding out, because finding out is expensive. So you look at it. You look at it for a good minute, which is longer than it sounds when you are standing still with a cart, and you see nothing moving on the ridge, and no smoke, and nothing on the road below it. And then you go the other way anyway, down onto the service track that runs south of the rise, which adds 20 minutes to the morning and puts a fold of ground between you and that ridge line for the whole of it. This is most of what danger actually is out here. It is not an event. It is a thing that quietly rewrites your route and adds 20 minutes and costs you a building you would otherwise have worked, and then does nothing at all day, every day for years. The people who survive in this trade are not the ones who are good in a bad moment. They are the ones who spend their whole working lives paying small, dull, unglamorous costs to make sure the bad moment does not arrive, and who never find out which of those 20-minute detours was the one that mattered. The track drops. The ridge goes out of sight behind the fold of ground. The cart runs easier on the gravel than it did on the broken plates, and the light is properly up now, flat and grey and sufficient. And ahead of you, maybe a mile on, you can see the top 2 floors of the office block, standing above the scrub with its windows out. The building comes up out of the scrub slowly, the way things do when you are walking with a load. 4 stories once, 3 now, more or less, because the top one has come down at the corner and left a slope of concrete and rebar spilling across what used to be a parking area. The windows are gone. All of them, everywhere, which is normal and tells you nothing, because glass does not last 200 winters, whether anybody helps it along or not. You stop the cart in the scrub about 40 yards short, and you stand there and you look at it. This is the part nobody thinks of as work. It has no motion in it. You are simply a person standing in weeds beside a handcart, looking at a doorway, and if somebody watched you doing it, they would think you were resting. You are not resting. You are reading. The doorway first, because the doorway is where the information is. A building that has been worked recently shows it at the entrance, and it shows it in ways that are dull and small and completely reliable. Dust, for one. There is always dust, a fine grey drift of powdered concrete and plaster, and whatever the wind has carried in, and it settles across a threshold in a smooth, unbroken skin if nothing has crossed it. It takes a few weeks to lay down properly, so you look for scuffs in it, for the flat oval smears that a boot leaves, for the twin parallel grooves of a cart or a sled, for the drag marks of something heavy taken out. You look at the height of the weeds in the entryway, because weeds get trodden and they take a season to stand back up. You look at whether the door itself is propped, and by what, and whether the prop looks weathered or fresh. This building shows you a threshold under a smooth grey skin of dust, with nothing in it but the star-shaped marks of bird feet, and one long, shallow line where something with a tail went across in the night. Weeds standing up straight in the doorway, waist-high, dry and unbroken. No prop on the door, because there is no door. Nobody has walked in here in a good while. That is the finding. And the finding took 2 minutes, and it is worth more than most of what you will pick up inside. Because the thing to understand about a building like this one is that it has been looted. Comprehensively. Repeatedly. Not once by an adventurer with a torch, but perhaps 30 or 40 times over 2 centuries by people exactly like you, each of them working it down a layer. and the fact that nobody has been in for a while does not mean it is untouched. It means only that the last person to work it decided it was finished. Which is a judgment, and judgments can be wrong, and the whole of your trade lives in the gap between what the last person thought was finished and what actually is. So here is how a working scavenger reads a building, which is a body of knowledge you were taught by an older salvager over about 4 years, and which nobody has ever written down. You skip the ground floor. Everyone works the ground floor. It is the first thing anybody sees. It is the easiest to carry out of, and it has been stripped to the studs since before your grandmother was born. There is nothing on a ground floor. You walk through it. You do not search it. You skip the obvious rooms on every floor, the desks in the open plan, the reception counters, the break room cupboards at eye level. All of it worked out, decades gone, because those are the places a person looks when they are looking, and every person who came through here was looking. What you work instead is everything that was never worth carrying out, and therefore was never carried out. Ceilings, first and most of all. Suspended ceiling tiles, the sort every office in the world had, and above them a void 18 inches deep, running the entire footprint of the floor, full of cable. Copper cable, in bundles, stapled to joists, run in trays, going everywhere. Nobody strips a ceiling void in a hurry. It is filthy. It is overhead work. It needs a ladder or a desk to stand on, and a cutter, and about 40 minutes a run, and a scavenger passing through for the good stuff will not stop to do it. So it is still there, in buildings that have been called empty for 50 years. Wall cavities, second. Same logic, worse access, better yield in the right building, because that is where the runs go vertically and where the boxes and the terminations sit. Then maintenance spaces, plant rooms, riser cupboards, the little steel doors on every landing that are marked with numbers and nothing else, because they were never meant for people, only for a man with a set of keys who came twice a year. Those doors are usually still locked, which is the loveliest sentence in this whole trade, and behind them are valves and fittings and small mechanical assemblies that were built to last 40 years without being looked at, and have therefore done exactly that. Under things, fourth. Not in, under floor voids, under stair treads, under the false bottoms of built-in units, behind as well, behind panels, behind wall-mounted cabinets that everyone has emptied and nobody has pulled off the wall. And last, the roof, if you can get to it, and if the structure will hold you, which today it will not because the corner has come down, and you can see daylight through the 3rd floor from where you stand. So, not the roof, not this one. You take the cart around to the loading side, where the concrete apron is, and you park it against the wall, where it will not be visible from the road. And you take out what you need, and leave the rest with it. Then you go in. The first thing inside is the smell, which is always the same, and which you stopped noticing years ago, and can still name: wet plaster, dry rot, bird. The second thing is the sound, which is nothing, and which you stand in for a moment and listen to properly. Not because you expect anything, because listening at the door of a building is free, and everything else you will do today has a cost. Then you work. The rules of working are simple, and you keep them without thinking about them now. Quiet first. Not silent, which is impossible with cutters and a pry bar, but quiet, which means you do not let metal drop on concrete. You do not let a length of conduit swing free and ring. You lower things instead of putting them down. Sound carries a long way across flat ground, and there is no reason to advertise. Daylight, second. You work the side of the floor with the windows out, because that is where you can see, and you do not use a lamp in a standing building in the daytime, for any reason at all. Not because of what a lamp might attract, because a lamp costs fuel, and fuel costs caps, and you have a window. You start on the second floor because it is high enough that the lazy stopped climbing, and low enough that the structure is sound. You drag a desk under a run of ceiling tiles, and you climb up on it, and you lift a tile out, and set it down flat rather than dropping it, and you put your head into the void. Dust comes down on your face. It always does. You turn your head, you spit, you look again. There is cable up there, a tray of it running the length of the corridor ceiling, 6 or 7 cores in a bundle, still stapled, still sheathed. Nobody has been in this void. You can tell because the dust up here is undisturbed too, sitting on the tray in a soft grey line. That is your morning. You cut it in lengths you can handle. You pull the sheath back with the blade and check the core, and it is copper, dull brown-green, with age but solid. And you strip and coil and drop the coils into the satchel over your shoulder until the satchel starts to change how you stand on the desk. And then you climb down and empty it into a sack and go back up. An hour of this. Then another. Your hands go through the whole predictable sequence they always go through, which is fine. Then hot, then sore, then numb, then simply distant, like they belong to somebody else who is being very patient with you. The dust settles into the creases of your knuckles and turns them grey. Your shoulders learn about the overhead work and complain, and are ignored. And what comes out of it at the end is not treasure. It is worth being clear about that. What comes out of a good morning in a picked-over office block is about 11 pounds of copper wire coiled, a double handful of steel screws and fixings, worked out of cable trays and door furniture, and a hinge plate, 2 ceramic insulator blocks off a riser, unbroken, which is the sort of thing you cannot manufacture anywhere in the Commonwealth, and which somebody will want. A short length of rubber hose from behind a plant room panel, cracked at one end, good for 1.5 feet of it, a tin of adhesive, seized solid, which is a maybe. 4 small circuit boards out of a wall-mounted control unit, which are the best thing you have found, because there is a woman 2 settlements over who buys those and does not tell anyone what for. And on the 2nd floor landing, in a maintenance cupboard whose lock you took the whole hinge off rather than fight, 1 lighter. Metal, the flip-top kind. The wheel corroded but turning. The flint housing intact. You sit on the floor with your back against the wall, and you turn that lighter over in your grey hands for a good half minute, and you are quietly, extremely pleased. Because here is the arithmetic that governs everything. And it is not the arithmetic anybody expects. It is not what is this worth. It is what is this worth per pound, and can I carry it? And what am I not carrying instead? You have a cart and a body, and about 11 hours of daylight, and the cart holds what it holds, and past a certain load, the cart stops being a help and becomes a thing you are dragging. Everything you pick up in this building today occupies a place that something else could have occupied. So every object goes through the same silent question the moment your hand closes on it. What does this weigh? What will it fetch? And is there anything in this building that would fetch more for the same weight? Copper wins that question almost always. It is dense, it is small, it is wanted everywhere by everyone, and it does not spoil. Screws win it. Small mechanisms win it, when they still turn. Ceramic wins it in the Commonwealth, specifically because nothing here is kilned anymore, and the lighter wins it more completely than any of them, because it weighs 3 ounces. And a person who needs fire and has none will pay for it. And there is not a rifle in this wasteland you could carry down 4 flights and out across 2 miles of open ground that would earn you as much for its weight as that small, dull, working piece of pre-war brass sitting in your palm. You put the lighter in the inside pocket, the one that closes, and you go back to work. By the time you have the first load ready, it is somewhere past 9, and the load is not large. It looks pathetic, honestly, laid out on the floor by the stairwell. 2 coils of stripped copper, a tin of screws you shook out of a fixture bracket, a length of rubber hose, 4 ceramic insulators, a fistful of small brass fittings, a roll of adhesive tape that has gone hard at the outer edge, but is still good 3 layers down. Set out flat like that, it looks like the contents of somebody's kitchen drawer. It weighs about as much as a full water jug, and it will take you most of 40 minutes to get it down 4 flights without dropping any of it, because the stairs have no rail, and the 3rd landing has a hole in it you have to step over while carrying a load in both arms. You do it in 2 trips. You always do it in 2 trips. The one time you tried it in 1, you spent the rest of that afternoon picking screws out of a stairwell in the dark, and you have never repeated it. Down at the bottom, the cart is where you left it, tucked behind the loading bay wall, where nothing walking the street would see it without turning its head. You crouch and repack, which is not the same as loading. Loading is putting things in. Repacking is arranging them. So nothing shifts, nothing rattles, and nothing sits where a wheel shock will drive one hard object through another. Copper goes low and center. The tin of screws goes wedged where it cannot slide. The insulators go in the sacking, wrapped because ceramic that arrives at a trader's table in pieces is not ceramic. It is grit. Your hands hurt. They hurt in the particular way that hands hurt after an hour of gripping cold metal and pulling against it. The ache sits in the webbing between thumb and finger, and it will be there until you sleep. You flex them a few times, open and shut, and get on with it. Now, it is worth stopping on the question of why any of this is worth anything. Because from the outside, it makes very little sense. You have just spent a morning of hard physical labor in a building with a hole in the stairs to acquire a handful of screws and some wire. In the world that built this office block, everything in your cart was worth less than the sandwich somebody ate at that desk. Screws came in boxes of 500. Tape was sold by the checkout. Copper wire ran through the walls of every structure on this continent in quantities nobody bothered to measure. The thing to understand is that the Commonwealth is not short of objects. It is drowning in objects. Every ruin on the eastern seaboard is packed to the ceiling with the accumulated stuff of 210 million people who bought constantly and threw away nothing that was not broken. Walk any street here, and you are walking past more manufactured goods than most of human history ever produced. What the Commonwealth is short of is manufacturing. Nobody smelts copper here. Nobody draws wire. Nobody makes a screw. There is not, anywhere between the glowing sea and the northern farms, a working facility that can take ore out of the ground and turn out a threaded fastener at the end of it. That capacity died in a single afternoon in 2077, and nothing has rebuilt it, because rebuilding it requires machine tools, which require machine tools to make, which is a problem the Wasteland has been failing to solve for 2 centuries. So the entire material economy of this region runs backwards. Instead of making new things out of raw material, people make new things out of old things. A settlement that wants a water pump does not manufacture a water pump. It finds a person who can build one out of a car radiator, a bathtub, 40 feet of hose, a length of chain, and about 600 screws. And then it finds somebody to supply those parts, and that somebody is you. That is what a workbench is, in practice. Not a bench, a conversion. You put junk in one end, and a working object comes out the other. And the limiting factor is never ingenuity, because the Wasteland has produced an extraordinary generation of improvising mechanics. The limiting factor is always supply. There is always a settler somewhere who knows exactly how to build the thing, and simply cannot get the fittings. This is why a farmer will hand over good caps for a roll of tape and not think twice. Tape is not tape to them. Tape is a seal on a pipe joint that is currently leaking a quarter of their irrigation into the dirt. The screws are not screws. They are the difference between a gate that shuts and a gate that is propped. Your cart is not full of rubbish. It is full of the missing pieces of about 9 different half-finished repairs in 3 different settlements. And the people waiting on those pieces have been waiting for weeks. Understand that? And the arithmetic of the morning stops looking absurd. You are not scraping value out of nothing. You are a distribution network. The material is already out here in enormous quantity, lying in the dark in 1,000 buildings, and the only thing standing between it and the people who need it is somebody willing to climb 4 flights of stairs in a building with a hole in it. You go back up. The 2nd floor is where you find the horse. It is on a windowsill in what was probably a corner office, sitting where somebody put it, and nobody has since moved it, which after 200 years is its own small miracle. It is about the length of your hand, some kind of glazed ceramic, white, with a blue saddle painted on, and it is entirely undamaged, not chipped, not cracked. There is dust on it, a finger thick, and under the dust the glaze is as bright as the day it came out of the box. You pick it up. It is heavier than it looks. You turn it over and there is a stamp on the underside, a maker's mark and a set of numbers, and a word that might be a place name. And you put it back. That is the decision, and it takes about 4 seconds, and it is not a sentimental one. The horse weighs as much as 150 screws. It is solid glazed ceramic, which means it cannot be broken down into insulators, because insulators need a specific shape and a specific composition, and this is neither. It cannot be melted. It cannot be cut. It has no metal in it, no mechanism, no wire. There is no workbench in the Commonwealth that converts a decorative horse into anything. And the trader at the settlement will look at it and offer you almost nothing, because he will have to find somebody who wants a horse. And the number of people in the Commonwealth in a position to want an ornament is very small, and none of them are shopping at his table. So it stays on the sill. It has stayed on that sill through the war and everything since, and it will stay there after you have gone, and that is fine. Still, somebody made it. That is the part that catches, briefly, while your hand is still on the windowsill. Somebody designed that horse. Somebody sat in a room and decided on the blue saddle rather than a red one, and argued about it, and a mold was cut, and a kiln somewhere ran a firing schedule, and a person on a line pulled it out and set it on a rack with 400 identical horses. It went in a box with tissue in it. It rode a truck. It sat on a shelf in a shop under a price tag, while people walked past it for weeks. And then somebody bought it. Somebody stood in that shop and chose it deliberately, and paid actual money for it out of a wage, and carried it home, and eventually carried it in here, and put it on this sill because they wanted something on the sill that was not a folder. That was a person with a desk in this room, and a view of the road you walked in on. They put a horse on their windowsill. They looked at it during meetings. That is the whole of what you can know about them, and it is more than you know about most. You leave it and move on, because there is another hour in this floor, and the light through the windows is at its best right now. The rest of the second floor gives you less. Somebody has been through the desks properly years ago and taken the obvious. But the ceiling grid on the north side is intact, and there is bracket wire running through it, and you spend 20 minutes on a chair pulling lengths of it down in coils. There is a door closer on a door that will never close again, and door closers are a spring and a piston and a cylinder of heavy machined steel, and you take the whole assembly off the frame in about 4 minutes with the flat bar and put it in the sack with real satisfaction, because that is a good piece, dense and mechanical, and wanted. And at the end of the corridor there is a terminal. It sits on a desk with its screen intact, the casing barely marked, keys all present. Somebody's workstation. It is the single most valuable-looking object on the floor, and you walk past it without slowing. There is no power in this building, and there has not been since before your grandmother. You cannot run it off anything you own. Even if you could, the case is riveted. The components inside are specialized board work that only a handful of people in the Commonwealth could use, and none of them are within a day's walk, and the whole assembly weighs about as much as everything else you have gathered today, put together. Whatever is on it, if anything survived, is somebody's schedule, somebody's expense claims, a message thread about a meeting on a Thursday. You go past. The screen stays dark. The dust on the keys keeps the shape it has held for 200 years, and you take your wire and your door closer and head for the stairs. The stairs take longer going down than coming up, because you are carrying, and because the third step from the bottom of the second flight has rotted through, and you have to swing wide of it with a full sack on your shoulder. You do this without thinking now. The first week you worked this building, you nearly went through it, and you remember the feeling of your boot meeting nothing, and you have never forgotten which step it is. Outside, the light has gone flat and hard. It is close to the top of the day. You know this the way anybody knows it who works outdoors without a clock, by the shortness of your own shadow, and by the fact that the air has stopped moving. The cart is where you left it, tucked into the loading bay under the concrete overhang, and it has not been touched. You check anyway. You check every time. You transfer the sack, sort the morning's take into the crates you keep for it. Wire in one, hardware in one, small dense metal in the third. And then you sit down on the low wall at the edge of the bay in the shade of the overhang, because it is midday and you have been on your feet for 6 hours, and this is the part of the day where you stop. The meal is not much, and you did not expect it to be. 2 strips of dried Brahmin, cut thin and salted so hard they draw the water out of your mouth. A flat bread from the settlement's oven, made from tato flour and something else, which is dense and slightly sweet, and keeps for 4 days without going bad. A handful of mutfruit, small, purple, halfway between a plum and a wet dust. All of it bought yesterday with yesterday's caps. You eat it slowly, not because you are savoring it, but because eating slowly makes it last, and because you have learned that if you eat fast in the middle of the day, you feel it in your legs by the afternoon. The bread came from the settlement's oven, which came from the settlement's crop, which came from a plot of ground that is not naturally arable in any sense a pre-war farmer would have recognized. The Commonwealth's soil is not soil. It is 200 years of ash, brick dust, ground glass, and whatever the rain has washed down out of the ruins, sitting on top of whatever was there before. Things grow in it because somebody worked out which things would, and then bred those things toward the ones that grew best, generation after generation, in the way people have always done, and mostly without knowing they were doing it. Which is why you are eating a purple fruit that no pre-war grocer ever stocked. Nobody designed the mutfruit. It arrived, and people ate it, and the ones that were sweeter got planted again. But the food is not the problem. The food has never been the problem. You could live on what grows within an hour of the settlement, badly but adequately, for years. The problem is water. Here is the arithmetic that governs every working life in the Commonwealth, and it is worth slowing down for, because everything else is downstream of it. A person walking and working needs somewhere between 3 and 5 liters of water a day, more in summer, more if they are hauling. There is water everywhere. The Commonwealth is a coastal region with a river system running through the middle of it, ponds in every hollow, rain 4 months of the year, and standing water in half the basements you will ever enter. Almost none of it is safe to drink. Not because of bacteria, though there is that too, because of what has been sitting in it. 2 centuries of fallout washed off 2 centuries of rooftops into 2 centuries of low ground, and the low ground is where water collects, which means the water and the contamination end up in exactly the same place by exactly the same process. The dirtier the puddle, the more likely it is that it got that way by collecting everything that ran off the surrounding acre. So a settlement's whole existence is organized around one question, which is where the clean water comes from and who controls it. There are 4 answers, and you know all of them intimately. The first is a pre-war well, if there is one, driven deep enough that what comes up has been filtered by 100 feet of rock on its way. These are the good ones. Settlements grow on top of them, like moss on a stone, and the ones that have them tend to keep them, and to have opinions about who else gets to use them. The second is a purifier. Pre-war units salvaged and kept running, or post-war assemblies bolted together out of pumps, filter medium, charcoal, and a great deal of stubbornness. Your settlement has one of these, and it is the single most important object within a day's walk, and it is checked twice a day by a woman whose entire standing in the community comes from the fact that she understands it. The third is boiling and filtering by hand, which handles what is alive in the water and does nothing whatsoever about what is dissolved in it. Better than nothing. Not much better. And the fourth is a chemical treatment, which some people swear by, and which mostly makes bad water taste like a different kind of bad. Your settlement's purifier produces, on a good day, enough for everyone with a small surplus. That surplus is sold. And because it is sold, it has a price. And because it has a price, it is a wage. You pay a little over 20 caps a day for water. Not for the water you drink at the settlement, which comes with living there, but for the 2 bottles you carry out with you, filled and capped and sealed, because you are working 8 hours away from the pump, and there is nothing to drink between here and there that you would put in your mouth. 20 caps a day. Every working day. Before you have eaten, before you have replaced a tool, before anything. So when somebody asks what a scavenger earns, the honest answer is that a scavenger earns whatever is left after the water, and that the water is not negotiable, and that this is the reason nobody in this line of work gets rich, and nobody quite starves either. You are always running to stay level with a pump. You unclip the first bottle now, and take 3 mouthfuls, no more, and clip it back. There is a discipline to it. You drink to schedule rather than to thirst, because thirst arrives late, and by the time it is loud you have already made worse decisions than you know. Which brings you to the other invisible account you are running, and the one you understand less well. Radiation in this world is not an event. It is an accumulation. It is not the thing that happens when you step somewhere wrong. It is the sum of 1,000 small, ordinary exposures that you take without noticing. In the water, you did not quite filter enough. In the dust you breathed in a basement. In the 4 hours you spent on the sunny side of a rubble field, where the concrete is a little hotter than concrete should be. Nobody in the Commonwealth is at 0. That is not a state that exists anymore. What you are managing is the rate. If you have a Pip-Boy, you know your rate exactly, because the thing has a counter in it, and it clicks, and it keeps a running total, and it will tell you, in a number, precisely how much of a problem the room you just walked into is. You do not have a Pip-Boy. Almost nobody does. They were vault equipment, and there were never many, and the ones in circulation belong to people whose lives have been unusual. What you have instead is a handheld counter, salvaged, about the size of your palm, with a needle and a speaker and a battery that you replace more often than you would like. It cost you 11 days of work, and it is the best purchase you have ever made. And you have the trade knowledge, which is older than the counter, and in some ways better, because it works when the battery is flat. You know that low ground holds it, and high ground sheds it. You know that anything that collected rain for 2 centuries has concentrated whatever was in the rain. So gutters, drains, sumps, culverts, and the bottom of any depression are places you approach with the counter already in your hand. You know that dust is worse than surfaces, because dust gets into you and stays. You know that a basement with standing water in it is a decision, not a room. You know that a rad storm leaves a residue for a day or 2 afterward on everything it touched, and that this is why nobody works the morning after one. And you know the signs in yourself, which is the part nobody likes to talk about. Fatigue that sleep does not fix. Appetite going, a particular metallic quality at the back of the mouth. When those arrive, you stop for a week and you take the treatment if you can afford it, which is a chem called Radaway, an infusion that binds what is in you and flushes it out, and which costs more than a week of work. That is the honest shape of it. You are running an account you cannot see, with a meter that needs batteries, against a treatment you cannot really afford. And the whole thing works out because you are careful and because you are still young enough. You take the counter out of the satchel now and run it over your hands, which is a small ritual and mostly superstition, because the counter is not that sensitive and your hands are not the problem. It reads what it read this morning. Fine. Then you do the real maintenance. The cart's left wheel has developed a click that was not there yesterday, and you turn the cart on its side and look at the hub and find nothing obviously wrong, which is worse than finding something. You work grease into it from a tin and set it back down and roll it a few feet, and the click is quieter but still present. That is a job for this evening. You check the strapping. You retie the crate on top, which had shifted. You wipe the flat bar and put it back in its loop. And then you sit for another minute in the shade with your shadow the size of your boots, and you make the day's real decision. There is a residential row 11 minutes east of here that you have been working through in sections for a month, and there is perhaps 3 good hours of daylight in it. Or there is the walk to the trading post, which is 2 hours from where you sit, and which would get you there with the light still up and the trader unhurried and in a decent mood. You already have a fair load. Not a good one, a fair one. You look at the cart, you look east, you go east. The row is 11 minutes east, and you have walked it enough times that your feet find the turn before your eyes do. It was a street once. You can still read the shape of it under the dirt. A straight line of frontages set back an even distance from a road, each with a rectangle of ground in front that would have been grass. 10 houses on the north side, 9 on the south, because one of them is a hole now, and has been since long before you were born. They are all open. Every door on this row was forced or fell in generations ago, and there is not a window with glass in it, and the interiors have been walked through so many times that the floors have paths worn across them, dust polished off the boards in a curving line from the front door to the kitchen to the stairs. That is 100 years of people going in, doing the obvious circuit, and coming out. A first-year scavenger looks at a row like this and sees nothing. Empty. Done. Somebody got here 2 centuries ago. You look at it and see 19 buildings that have each been searched by 100 people who are all searching the same way. That is the whole trade, and it took you a long time to understand it. The wasteland did not run out of things. It ran out of obvious things. Every cupboard at eye level in the Commonwealth was emptied inside the first 10 years. Every drawer that opens when you pull it was pulled. What is left is everything that requires a tool, or a theory, or the patience to be wrong 6 times before you are right once. So you do not go in through the front door and walk the polished path. You start with the floors. A pre-war house of this kind was built with a wooden floor laid over joists, and between the boards and the ceiling of the room below, there is a cavity about the depth of your forearm. Things fall into it, coins fall into it, and screws, and small tools, and once, memorably, a whole ring of keys that somebody had spent an evening looking for in the year 2075. More importantly, things were put into it, because a floor cavity is where a nervous person hid things, and the last few weeks before the war made a great many people nervous. You find the loose board by walking. You go slowly with your weight rolling heel to toe, and you listen for the note that changes. In the third house, it changes near the hearth, and you get the flat bar under the end of the board and lift, and the nails come up with a long complaining sound that you do not love making. And underneath, there is a gap full of 200 years of dust. And in the dust, 3 things: a brass fitting off some kind of lamp, a cluster of screws that must have gone in one at a time over decades, and a tin sealed, the lid rusted into place, weighing about what a tin of anything weighs. You put the tin in the satchel without opening it. You will open it at home, with light and time. Opening it here would be a decision made standing up. The chimney flues are the other reliable place, and they are unpleasant enough that most people skip them. You reach up inside past the damper with your arm to the shoulder and your face turned away, and what comes down is soot and mortar, and sometimes a soft bundle where somebody put something up out of reach and did not come back for it. In the 5th house, nothing. In the 6th, a wad of cloth that has become one substance with itself, and inside it, a small folded knife with a broken blade and a handle of good bone. The blade is useless. The handle is worth something to a man in the settlement who makes grips. The rivets are brass. That is how you think about the knife. Not as a knife. Behind the houses there is ground, and ground is the last frontier of this trade because digging is slow and nobody wants to do it. But people buried things. They buried them in the panic, and they buried them for storage. And they buried them because a garden was where you put anything you did not want in the house. You do not dig at random. You dig where the ground remembers something. A rectangle of subsidence, a place where the plants grow differently, the corner of a fence line where a post used to be. You get one hole in today, and it gives you a length of pipe and a jar with nothing in it. That is the honest ratio. You will not hear it in the stories. 9 holes of nothing, and 1 of something. 19 houses, and 4 worth entering. And the skill is not in the finding. The skill is in being willing to be wrong all afternoon without letting it slow you down. It is in the 8th house that the afternoon changes. The 8th house has a garage attached, a low building with a door that came off its runners so long ago that it has fused into the frame at an angle. Everyone goes in over the gap at the bottom, on their belly, into a space that has been stripped to the walls. You have done it yourself twice. Today, you notice that the garage is longer on the outside than it is on the inside. Not by much. A pace, maybe two. It could be nothing. Walls were thick, houses were odd. But you go in over the gap again, and you get to the back wall, and you knock, and the sound is wrong. Hollow, and then a stud, and then hollow again. It is not a hidden room. Nothing so exciting. It is shelving that somebody boarded over. A rack of storage that was walled in with cheap panel at some point before the war, probably to make the garage tidy for a sale. And the panel has held for 2 centuries, because nobody had a reason to hit it. You have a reason. You have a flat bar. The panel comes off in 3 pieces, and behind it there is a shelf about waist height running the width of the wall. And on the shelf there is a wooden crate. And inside the crate, packed in what was once shredded paper and is now grey powder, there are components. You go through them by feel and by lamp. Ceramic insulators, 2 dozen. Copper coils, wound tight and unoxidized because they sat in the dark and the dry. A row of small, sealed cylinders that are almost certainly capacitors. And a handful of screws in a paper packet that turns to dust when you touch it. You sit back on your heels in a walled-off shelf in a garage that 100 people have crawled through. And you allow yourself, briefly, to feel very good. Then the arithmetic starts, because the arithmetic always starts. The crate weighs more than you can add to a cart that already has a fair load, and a wheel that clicks. Not close. You could carry the coils. You could carry the coils and half the ceramics, and you would be walking 2 hours with a cart at the edge of what its axle will take, on a road where a broken wheel means you sit in the open until somebody comes past who is willing to help you for a share. Here is where the trade becomes a set of rules rather than a set of skills, and it is worth stopping on because it is the part that surprises people. There is no law in the Commonwealth. There is no court that will hear you say a garage was yours. But there is a working understanding between people who scavenge for a living, and it is enforced by the only thing that enforces anything out here, which is that everyone has to keep dealing with everyone else afterward. The understanding runs roughly like this. A route is claimed by working it, not by declaring it, by being seen repeatedly, coming back from the same direction with a cart, and by saying at the fire which way you went. Over a season, the other salvagers in your settlement learn where you go, and they go elsewhere, because a picked route is a waste of their day, and because starting an argument with someone you will see every evening for the rest of your life is a poor return on a satchel of screws. A cache is claimed by marking it. If you find more than you can carry, and you leave it, you mark it. And the mark says, this has worked, someone is coming back, and that someone can be found. Another working scavenger who finds a marked cache will leave it, mostly, because the day they take one is the day their own caches stop being safe, and because the settlement's traders hear about these things, and a trader who thinks you are a cache thief will find your goods somehow worth less than they were last week. What happens to someone who works another's route is not violence. It is much slower and much more effective than that. The traders' prices go soft on them. The gate watch stops mentioning what they saw on the eastern road. Nobody tells them a bridge went out. They stay, and they get worse at the job. and eventually they go somewhere else. None of that protects a cache from someone who does not live near you. Raiders do not respect marks. Passing scavengers with no stake in your settlement's opinion of them do not respect marks. So the mark is only half the protection. The other half is that the cache is hidden well enough that nobody finds it who was not told where to look. You put the crate back on the shelf. You take the coils, because copper is the densest value in the room, and because your buyer will take copper on any day of the week. You take 6 of the ceramics and leave 18. Then you rebuild the wall. Not perfectly. Perfectly would look like work. You lean the 3 panel sections back into place in the order they came off and press the edges into the old nail holes. And you scrape dust off the floor with the side of your hand and throw it against the panel so it dulls the fresh edges, and then you back out and look at it from the gap in the door with the lamp low, and it looks like a wall that nobody has touched. The mark goes outside, on the frame, at knee height, where the light rakes across it in the afternoon, and nowhere else. 3 short scratches and a dot. It means nothing to anyone. It is not a code the settlement uses. It is a thing you started doing 4 years ago and have never explained to a living person. And its entire security is that it looks like the 10,000 other scratches on every door frame in the Commonwealth. You count paces from the frame to the road and fix the number in your head with the number of the house and the shape of the roofline behind it. Because you have learned not to trust yourself to recognize a street you have seen 400 times. Then you pick up the cart handles, and the wheel clicks, and you turn back west with the light going long and gold across the row. The cart is heavier now, and everything about the way you move has changed. Loaded, it does not roll so much as it consents to be dragged. The handles sit lower in your hands. On the flat, you can walk almost normally, but the road is not flat anywhere for longer than 30 paces, and on every rise you have to lean your weight forward into the frame and take shorter steps, and on every descent you have to lean back and let your heels do the braking, or the whole thing will run down the slope ahead of you and take your wrists with it. The wheel that clicks now clicks under load, which is a different and slightly worse sound, a sound with a small hesitation in it, and you have decided you will look at it tonight and not before. You are also, though you would not put it this way to anyone, walking a different road than the one you walked this morning. It is the same road. It is the route that has changed. Empty, you take the direct line. Because empty, you are worth almost nothing, and can move fast, and can, if the day goes strangely, simply leave. Loaded, you are worth something, and the arithmetic reverses. Now you want the road with the long sight lines, even though it adds 20 minutes. Now you want the stretch that runs beside the water, rather than the stretch that runs through the culvert, because the culvert is faster and shorter, and you cannot see either end of it from the middle. Now you take the farm track that swings out wide around the old rail embankment, because the embankment has a good view of the road, and you would rather be the one with the view. None of this is fear, exactly. It is closer to the way a person carries a full cup. You do not think about the cup. You simply move differently, all the way through, and you only notice you were doing it when you set the cup down. The light is doing the thing it does in the late afternoon out here, coming in low and sideways, and turning the dust in front of you into something almost solid. Everything ahead of you is gold, and everything behind you is going blue. The wind has dropped the way it usually does at this hour. You can hear your own wheel, your own boots, the cart frame flexing, and past that, far off, a bird that is probably not a bird. Here is something worth slowing down for, because it explains why you are walking at all. You are not taking your copper to a factory. There is no factory. What you are taking it to is a table, and behind the table is a man who will pay you less than the copper is worth. And behind him, sooner or later, is a caravan. Goods in the Commonwealth move on legs. Brahmin legs mostly, and human ones. A caravan is 2 or 3 of the big two-headed cattle, loaded past the point where you would think an animal could stand up, and a driver who knows the route, and 1 or 2 guards who are paid by the day, and who spend the entire day doing what you have been doing for the last hour, which is looking at ridge lines. They walk a circuit. They take copper and screws and adhesive out of a settlement like yours, and carry it 3 days to somewhere that has a working machine shop. And they carry back the things that shop makes. And they take a cut at every stage of that. And the cut is not greed. The cut is the road. The cut is the guard's pay, and the animal's feed, and the fact that the driver has to sleep somewhere, and the fact that some percentage of every route, over a long enough run of years, does not arrive. So the trader at the table pays you a scavenger's price, and sells to the caravan at a settlement price, and the caravan sells at a workshop price. And by the time your coil of copper wire is drawn out into new wire for somebody's water pump, it has changed hands 4 times and quadrupled in value, and you got the smallest number in the chain. You know this. Every scavenger knows this. What most people outside the trade get wrong is imagining there is some clever alternative you are too unambitious to take. There isn't. To sell at the workshop price, you would have to walk 3 days with a cart, which means 3 days of not scavenging, plus food, plus water, plus doing it alone with no guard and no animal, and arriving as an unknown face with no standing and no history, and nobody to guarantee your weights. The trader's cut is not a tax on you. It is the price of being able to work 1 day and get paid the same day, in a world where almost nobody can do either. There is a farm on this stretch, a real one, 4 buildings, and a fenced field of something low and pale green that you have never bothered to learn the name of. The woman who runs the fence line is out along the eastern side with a bucket, and she sees you coming a long way off, which is the point of the fence line, and she waits. You stop. This is not politeness, although it is also that. You tell her the row you worked, without saying which house. She tells you a caravan came through 2 days ago, heading north, and is expected back at the end of the week, which is worth knowing, because a trader who is about to resupply pays differently from a trader who is sitting on stock. You tell her the water below the overpass ran cloudy this morning. She tells you that a family came through yesterday from the west, 3 of them, asking about work, and that they mentioned smoke somewhere out past the old quarry road 2 days running. That last one is the one you will carry. Neither of you has paid the other anything. But this is a trade, and both of you know it is a trade, and if you had come past with nothing to say, you would have got nothing back. And if you came past with nothing to say 3 or 4 times in a row, she would stop stopping. Information is the only commodity out here that does not weigh anything and does not spoil, and it is the only one you can give away without being poorer. Which route is walkable? Which well went bad? Which building has been worked out, and which one has been worked badly, which is not the same thing? Who is buying? Who is short? Where the smoke is. You thank her. She goes back along her fence. You take up the handles. And you adjust your route again, without any drama about it, because of the smoke. This is the part that people who have never lived here find hard to picture properly. They imagine the danger of this place as a series of events. It isn't. From the inside, it is a set of prices. Raiders exist. That is a flat fact, like weather. And their existence out past the quarry road, where you were not going and now will certainly not go, does not mean anything is going to happen to you today. What it means is that the northern approach will be quiet for a week, and the traders on that side will be short of stock, and their prices will go up. What it means is that the settlement you are walking toward has a wall, and the wall took 400 hours of labor that could have gone into a well, and every family inside paid for that wall in work they did not get to do somewhere else. What it means is that the gate is watched from an hour before dawn to an hour after dark, and 2 people are on that watch instead of in the field. What it means is that a guard's day rate is what it is. What it means is that the reason you told someone your route this morning is not superstition. That is what the danger is, most days, for most people. Not a fight, a line item. It is in the price of everything you buy and the wage of everyone you know, and it shapes the road you walk and the hour you leave and the width of the wall. And then, nearly every single day, nothing happens, and you get where you were going, and the cost was already paid long before you set out. You go the long way around. It adds a quarter hour. Nobody will ever know you did it. The last stretch runs downhill toward the settlement, and you can smell it before you can see much of it. Wood smoke and animals, and the wet mineral smell of the pump runoff. The wall comes up out of the ground in front of you in that patchwork way they all have. Corrugated sheet and salvaged fencing, and a stretch of genuine cinder block, where somebody once had the material and the time. The watch on the platform sees you. You raise a hand, not high. They raise one back and do not otherwise move. And that small exchange is the whole of the security procedure for a face they have seen 500 times. Inside, the ground changes under the wheel from broken road to packed dirt, and the cart runs suddenly easier, and the noise of the place comes up all at once. Somebody is hammering. A child is being shouted at without any particular anger. 2 men are arguing about a hinge. You have got here with light left. Perhaps an hour and a half of it. That matters more than it sounds, because a trader looking at your load in daylight and a trader looking at it by lamp are 2 different men with 2 different opinions of what ceramic is worth. And the one in daylight is the one you want, and you have made him twice this week already by leaving the row when you did, rather than working the extra half hour. The trading post is the long shed against the north wall, with the awning out front and the table under it. And the table is where you are going, and you can see from here that he has cleared the surface, which means he is expecting stock and not just browsers. You bring the cart in under the awning and set the handles down on the ground for the first time in 3 hours, and your hands released, do not immediately unclench. He comes out from under the shed with his sleeves already pushed up, which is his version of a greeting, and he looks at the cart before he looks at you. That is not rudeness. It is the job. You do the same thing to a doorway. The sort begins without either of you saying much. He pulls the cover back and starts lifting things out onto the table in categories that exist only in his head, and are, you have come to understand over 4 years of this, completely consistent. Metal that can be worked cold goes to the left. Metal that needs heat goes behind it. The wire coils go in a shallow crate of their own, because wire is the one thing he will not have loose on his table, where a browser can palm a length of it. Adhesive, sealant, anything in a tin or a tube goes right in front of him, where he can keep a hand near it. The ceramic he handles one piece at a time, holding each up and turning it. And this is the part where you watch his face and learn nothing, because he has been buying from scavengers longer than you have been walking. And his face does exactly what he wants it to. What is happening on that table is the valuation of your entire day, and it takes him about 4 minutes. You have thought about that before. 11 hours of walking and climbing and prying and deciding, the reading of a doorway, the choice to leave the row when you did, the whole accumulated craft of it, and it resolves into 4 minutes of a man sorting your work into piles and arriving at a number. There is nothing unfair in it. He is not undervaluing the day. He is valuing the material, which is all he can sell, and the day was only ever the means by which the material got to his table. Now, before he says the number, it is worth stopping on the thing the number will be counted in, because it is genuinely strange, and almost nobody who uses it every day ever thinks about it. You are going to be paid in bottle caps. Small crimped steel discs off the tops of soft drink bottles, most of them stamped with the logos of companies that stopped existing 2 centuries ago. Most of them bent, many of them rusted at the crimp. As a physical object, a cap is worthless. It has no metal content worth recovering. You cannot make anything out of it. You have, on this very day, walked past objects 100 times more useful and left them because they were not worth the weight. And yet you will carry home a bag of these and consider yourself paid. The reason goes back a long way, and a long way west. The story, as the traders tell it, is that out in the old California region, there was a market town where the big commercial power was a company of water merchants, and water was the one thing in that country that everybody needed, that nobody could fake, and that came out of a fixed number of caravans. Somebody had the idea of issuing a token against it. A cap was a claim on a measure of clean water, and the merchants who backed it had the water to make good on the claim. And the caps could be counted and carried, and they could not be printed by anyone with paper, because you would have to find them, and you can only find so many. Whether it happened exactly like that, you have no way of knowing. That is a story told by men who heard it from men. What is not in doubt is that it worked, and that it spread the way a working idea spreads, along trade routes, hand to hand, until it had gone further than the water ever did. Because here is the part that matters to you, on this side of the continent. this long after. The backing is gone. Nobody in the Commonwealth is going to hand you a measure of water for a cap, because a company on the far side of a dead country said they would. That arrangement, if it ever existed, has nothing to do with the coin in your hand. The cap kept working anyway. It kept working because of what it is, rather than what it promised. It is small. It does not spoil. It does not burn. It does not rot in a wet satchel the way paper does, and paper is the alternative, and this world is very hard on paper. It is uniform enough to count fast, and irregular enough that faking it is more trouble than it earns. And most of all, the supply is fixed and slowly shrinking. Nobody is making bottle caps. The bottling plants stopped in a single afternoon in 2077, and the presses are rust. Every cap in circulation was made before the war, and everyone that gets lost down a floorboard or dropped in a river is gone for good. Which means the money supply of a whole region is, quietly, a slowly draining pool of pre-war litter. Traders in the old country used to seek out the bottling machinery for exactly this reason. And where anyone still has a working press, the caps out of it are watched very carefully by everybody who trades in them. So what does one actually buy here in 2287? A cap buys almost nothing on its own. 10 of them get you a meal at a settlement fire if the settlement is feeling generous about it. Water, purified and safe, runs you a handful for a bottle in most places, more if the local pump is out. Ammunition is the expensive thing, always, everywhere, and a scavenger who is spending caps on ammunition regularly is a scavenger who is doing the job wrong. A Stimpack, the pre-war auto-injector that most of the Wasteland's medicine still runs on, sits up around 100 caps, and will go higher than that if you need one in a hurry, which is when you always need one, which is a thing traders understand perfectly. That number is the one you keep in your head as a ruler. A day like today, a good day, is worth something in the neighborhood of 1 injector. That is the honest measure of it. You spend 11 hours making one small quantity of emergency medicine. And if the day goes badly enough that you need the medicine, the day was worth nothing at all. He gives you his number. You do not take it, and he does not expect you to. And neither of you regards the next few minutes as a dispute. The negotiation is not really about the total. It is about categories. He has put the wire in with the general metal, and you point at the wire, and he says nothing and moves it, and that is worth more than any amount of arguing about the sum, because wire is not metal. Wire is a component, and a component prices against what it replaces rather than what it weighs. Somebody's generator is going to run because of that coil. He knows this. You know he knows. The move is a courtesy that costs him caps and buys him a scavenger who comes to his table first, and both of you have priced that trade correctly. The ceramic you lose. He argues that the insulator porcelain is chipped at the collar, and you argue that the collar is not the working surface, and he says he can only sell what somebody will buy. And the truth is, he is right, and you knew the chip was there when you took it, and you took it anyway, because it was light. You let the ceramic go at his figure. The adhesive you do not argue about at all, because the price of adhesive in this settlement is not set by him. That is worth a moment, because it is the part of the market that is invisible from the outside. He does not sit at that table as an independent man setting prices by feel. He has an arrangement with the people who run the place, and the arrangement has terms. There is a weight standard, kept as a set of iron pieces in a box under the table, and once a season, somebody who is not him checks his balance against a second set, held in the settlement's store, because a trader with a light thumb is a problem that ruins a market for everyone in it, and the settlement knows it. There is a fixed price on a short list of goods that the settlement considers necessary. Water, clean bandaging, adhesive and sealant, because those are what keep roofs on and pipes closed, and a settlement with no sealant is a settlement that is one storm from being nowhere. On those things, he takes a set margin and no more. And in exchange, the settlement lets him have the shed, the awning, the protection of the wall and the watch, and the right of first refusal on everything that comes through the gate on a cart. He complains about this. He complains about it to you, most weeks, in the same words. You have noticed that he has never once tried to trade anywhere without such an arrangement, and that when a free trader came through last winter and sold cheap out of a pack for 2 days and moved on, it was not the settlement council that ran him off, because nobody ran him off, and it was not necessary, because a man with a pack and no wall and no weights and no season-end inspection is a man everybody buys from once. The count is done in front of you, on the table, in stacks of 10 pushed across one at a time. He counts fast and correctly, and lets you watch. When he is finished, he sweeps the last few uneven ones into your palm, rather than stacking them, which is his signal that the total is the total, and he's not going to move again. You put them in the bag at your hip, and you feel the weight go in. And it is a real weight, more than people expect. A day is heavy in your hand, and it is already spent. Not literally, not yet. The bag is closed and nothing has left it. But you know the shape of what is coming out. Water for tomorrow and the day after. Food that is not what you carried today. The wheel, which has been complaining for a week, and will not last another, and which the man who works metal at the far end will fix for a price you already know, because you asked him 3 days ago and have been putting it off. There is a debt on the cutters, half paid. There is a share owed to the household you eat with, because that is the arrangement, and it is a fair one. What is left after all of that is a small quantity, and the small quantity is the entire point, and you already know where it goes. Not to anything. Into the tin under the boards, where it joins the others, against the day when a wheel or a lung or a bad week takes more than a day can cover. You pick the handles up again. The cart is light now, and pulls wrong, the way an empty cart always does. The water stall is 3 doors down from the trader's table, and it is where the caps go first, because water is not something you gamble on. The woman who runs it has a barrel on a stand and a purifier behind her that runs off a solar panel bolted to the roof, and she fills what you put in front of her, and takes what she takes, and neither of you discusses it. The price does not move. It has not moved since the spring. That steadiness is worth something on its own, and everyone who buys from her knows it. You have 2 bottles and a bladder that folds flat when it is empty, and you fill all 3, and the weight comes back onto your hip in a form you actually want. Tomorrow's walking is in there. So is the day after, if you are careful and the weather stays cool. This is worth slowing down for, because the arithmetic is not obvious from outside. A settlement with a working purifier is not a settlement with free water. The purifier is a machine, and machines in the Commonwealth are kept alive by a continuous, expensive act of will. Filters foul, membranes tear, the panel that powers it degrades a little every year and cannot be replaced, only patched and cleaned and coaxed. Somebody has to do that work, and somebody has to be paid to do it, and the payment comes out of every bottle sold. When you hand her caps, you are not buying water. You are buying a share in the continued operation of a 200-year-old device that nobody alive knows how to build from nothing. The same is true of nearly everything you will spend on tonight. That is the Commonwealth's real condition, and once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it. There is no shortage of matter. There is a permanent, grinding shortage of anyone who can make matter do something. Food next, from the household you eat with. And here the transaction is less a transaction than an accounting. You put your share on the table without being asked. In return, there is a bowl of something with tato in it and a little Brahmin fat for taste, and bread that is dense and slightly sour and very good when you have walked all day. You eat sitting on the step outside because the room is small and the evening is warm, and you eat faster than you mean to. Then the wheel. The man who works metal has a bench under an awning at the far end of the settlement, and a small forge he runs on scavenged coal and charcoal, and he has been expecting you. He tips the cart, takes the wheel off, and holds it up against the light without saying anything, which is how he says a great deal. The rim is out of true. The bearing surface is worn oval, which is why it has been complaining. He can shim it. He can pack it. He can true the rim if you leave it with him overnight, and he can do all three for the price he quoted 3 days ago, which he does not restate and does not need to. You give him the caps. He does not count them where you can see, which is a different courtesy than the traders and means something else. It means he has known you for 4 years. Here is something easy to misunderstand about a settlement like this one. It looks like a collection of people who happen to live near each other. It is not. It is a small, dense web of obligations that everyone carries and nobody writes down. The water woman keeps her prices flat, because a flat price makes a settlement stable, and a stable settlement keeps her stall standing. The metal man does not haggle with regulars, because his living depends on there being regulars 10 years from now. You pay your share to the household even in weeks when you eat elsewhere, because the arrangement is what makes the household a place you can come back to. None of this is charity, and none of it is sentiment. It is infrastructure made out of habit, which is the only kind of infrastructure the Wasteland reliably produces. Pre-war, this function was performed by contracts, insurance, courts, and a currency backed by a government. Now it is performed by the fact that everyone here will see everyone else tomorrow. By full dusk, there is a fire going in the open ground near the gate, small, more for company than heat. 6 or 7 people, sometimes 10. A couple of farmers off the eastern plots. 2 men who guard the gate in rotation and are off shift. Another salvager, a woman who works the north side and whose route has never crossed yours, which is why the 2 of you get on. The talk at a fire like this is trade, though nobody would call it that. Somebody has been to the Water Tower Road and says the culvert has finally collapsed, which means an hour added to that route for everyone who used it, which means the people who used it are recalculating in their heads before the sentence is finished. Somebody heard from a caravan hand that there is a workshop east of the river buying wire at a better rate than anyone here pays. That claim gets examined the way you would examine a coin. Who told him? Was he selling something? How far east? The North Side woman says she found a maintenance stair in a building she has worked twice and never noticed, behind a panel that looked like wall, and she found it because the floor dust in front of it was thicker than the floor dust anywhere else. She does not say which building. Nobody asks. She is not telling you where. She is telling you that the trick works, and that is a gift, and you will use it next week, and think of her when you do. That is the actual currency at a fire. Not the location. The method. You listen more than you talk, and you contribute the culvert business you passed on the walk-in, and you mention, without specifics, that the residential rows on your side are still producing if you go under the floors, which everybody already suspects, and which costs you nothing to confirm. Somebody puts a log on. The light drops and comes back up. And here is the thing that is worth naming plainly before the day closes. What you have is a skill, not a knack, not luck, not the accident of having survived. A skill learned the way any trade is learned, over years, mostly through being wrong. You can stand in a doorway and know within a minute whether a building has been worked in the last season, from the dust, the door swing, the state of the obvious places. You can look at a ceiling and know where the conduit runs. You can pick up a component and know what it weighs, what it sells for, and whether the ratio justifies carrying it 4 hours. You can read a sky at midday and decide whether the afternoon is safe. And you are right about that far more often than you are wrong. And the times you were wrong are why you are right now. You can price a stranger's junk in 4 seconds. You can talk to a trader who is better at this than you and still come away with a fair number, because you know which items he wants and which he is pretending to want. That is not a small thing. Put a competent pre-war professional in your boots at dawn, and they would be dead of thirst or bad water inside a week. Not because they were stupid, but because none of what you know is intuitive. All of it had to be discovered by somebody and passed hand to hand, and you are one of the hands. You are good at something hard. Hold on to that, because the next part is also true. Nobody asked you whether you wanted this trade. The world you are expert in was designed. Not the ruins exactly, and not the frost that broke the roads, but the condition. Somewhere in a building that no longer exists, people sat at desks and made decisions about weapons and about who would be sheltered and about which experiments were worth running on, which populations. And then they filed the paperwork, and then they went home and had dinner and complained about the commute. It was a job to them. It had a title and a salary and quarterly targets. The men who signed off on the Vault program did not think of themselves as monsters. They thought of themselves as busy. They kept immaculate records. That is the part that never stops being remarkable. There are terminals still standing in this Commonwealth with intact accounting for procurement, personnel, and projected yields. All of it neat, all of it preserved better than any building. The institution that made your world documented everything about itself. It documented nothing about you. It does not know your name, your settlement, your route, the shape of your hands, the fact that you can find a maintenance stair by reading floor dust. It never intended to. You are not a line item. You are what happened downstream of the line items 2 centuries later. And if any of them could see you, they would not understand what they were looking at. This is not a criticism of you. It is an observation about the machine you live inside. And it does not take anything away from the day. The day was real. 20-odd miles on your legs. A good crate cached under stone with a mark on it only you can read. A fair count on the table. A wheel that will be true by morning. Water for 2 days on your hip. That is a day's work, done well, by someone who knows how. The fire is down to embers now, and people are drifting. The Northside woman says something about an early start and goes. The gate men change over quietly. The way they do. You walk back with your empty cart pulling wrong the whole way, and you stand it up against the wall where it always goes, handles down, so the rain runs off the bed instead of into it. The bag with what is left goes under the boards in the tin with the others. You put the lamp out. Outside, past the wall, the settlement's pump turns over once and settles into its rhythm, the way it does every night, the way it has since before you were born. Somebody will get up in 4 hours to check it. It runs on in the dark.